The judge slammed the gavel, and the man in handcuffs realized the lawyer prosecuting him was the son of the friend he murdered. In that moment, his empire collapsed. The courtroom fell silent. 20 years of running, hiding behind success, behind philanthropy, behind smiles at charity galas, all of it crumbled in the space between one heartbeat and the next. This was karma. Patient, relentless, inevitable. But long before that courtroom, before the handcuffs and the cameras and the shocked gasps from the gallery, there was betrayal. There was blood money. There was a promise broken to a dead man's family. There were two men who called each other brother, who built dreams with their bare hands, who swore oaths under the stars. And there was a choice, a single choice, that would poison everything it touched for 2 decades. If you believe the past always comes back to collect its debt, stay with me, because this story will remind you that some debts can never be forgiven, only paid in full. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. And comment your location below. I want to know where my amazing viewers are watching from. I read every comment and I will be giving shout out in my next video. Shout out to Sharon from UK, Firestorm Cousin from Florida, and Jabum Somi from Sweden. Now back to the story. Enoch Okocha was the kind of man who could sell you your own dreams and make you thank him for it. Charming, ambitious, always 3 steps ahead in conversation. Always dressed just sharp enough to make you notice. He grew up watching his father struggle, watching opportunities slip through calloused hands, watching poverty dress itself up as humility. He promised himself he would never be invisible, never be the man people looked past. Samson Adebayo was different. Brilliant, yes, but brilliant in a quieter way. He was the man who remembered your birthday, who asked about your mother's health, who stayed late to help a colleague finish a proposal. Where Enoch burned with ambition, Samson glowed with integrity. People trusted him instinctively. They met at a business seminar in Lagos. Both young, both hungry, both convinced they could build something that mattered. Enoch had the vision and the ruthlessness. Samson had the ethics and the expertise. Together, they were unstoppable. They started with nothing. A shared office barely large enough for 2 desks. Client meetings held in hotel lobbies because they could not afford their own conference room. Nights stretched into mornings, fueled by instant coffee and the unshakable belief that they were building something real. Enoch handled the deals, the negotiations, the aggressive expansion. Samson managed operations, client relationships, the careful construction of a reputation built on honesty. Their verbal pact was simple, almost sacred. If one of us dies, the other protects his family. No lawyers, no paperwork, just 2 men shaking hands in a cramped office at 3 in the morning, believing that their word meant something. The business grew faster than either of them had imagined. Government contracts, private sector partnerships. Money began to flow, first in streams, then in rivers. Within 5 years, they were millionaires. Within 7, they were powers. Enoch bought his first mansion. Samson bought his mother a house and set up a trust fund for his young son Abraham. But something shifted. Enoch started arriving late to meetings Samson had arranged, started questioning decisions publicly that he had agreed to privately, started watching Samson receive accolades, watching clients request Samson specifically, watching Samson's name carry weight that his own did not. Envy is a quiet poison. It does not announce itself. It seeps in through the cracks of insecurity, disguising itself as ambition, as strategy, as self-preservation. Enoch told himself he was not jealous. He told himself he was protecting the business. He told himself that Samson's moral rigidity was holding them back from opportunities, from growth, from the kind of wealth that could change generations. Before we continue, like this video if you believe loyalty should mean something. Because what comes next is the moment loyalty died. The investor arrived on a Thursday, a man with connections that stretched into the presidency, with offshore accounts and government influence, and absolutely no interest in ethics. He wanted a partner for a lucrative deal involving construction contracts, land acquisition, and payments that would never appear on any official ledger. He wanted Enoch, alone. They met in a private club where membership cost more than most people earned in a year. The investor laid it out plainly. The deal was worth tens of millions, but Samson would never agree to it. Samson would ask questions, demand transparency, insist on legal review. Samson would kill the opportunity with his conscience. The investor leaned back in his leather chair and said the words that would destroy everything. Remove Samson from the equation, and you control the company. Remove Samson, and you become the sole decision maker. Remove Samson, and all of this is yours. Enoch left that meeting with his hands shaking. He told himself he was disgusted. He told himself he would never betray his brother. But the seed was planted, and seeds have a way of growing in darkness, fed by fear and watered by greed. Over the next weeks, Enoch watched Samson differently, watched him turn down a questionable client, watched him insist on fair wages for their workers, even when it cut into profits, watched him announce plans to restructure the company, to bring in an independent board, to ensure transparency, watched him talk about legacy, about building something clean, about being able to look his son in the eye and say he earned every naira honestly. Every noble word felt like a threat. Every ethical stand felt like a personal attack. Because Enoch knew that Samson's integrity would eventually expose the shortcuts Enoch had already taken, the bribes already paid, the deals already made in shadow. The investigation would not just limit the company, it would destroy Enoch. One evening, Samson came to Enoch's office with documents. He wanted to formalize their partnership, legal papers that would protect both families if anything happened, papers that would guarantee his wife and son would inherit his share, papers that would make the verbal promise legally binding. Enoch looked at those papers and saw a cage, saw his control slipping away, saw Samson's family legally entitled to half of everything he wanted for himself. That night, alone in his mansion, Enoch made the choice. He contacted the investor. He said yes, and in that moment, he crossed a line that no amount of wealth could ever justify. He chose money over brotherhood. He chose empire over honor. He chose himself over everything they had built together. Samson Adebayo had no idea that his best friend, his brother, the man who stood beside him at his wedding, had just signed his death warrant. The business trip was Enoch's idea, a potential client in Port Harcourt, a deal that required Samson's expertise, a chance to expand their reach. Samson hesitated. His son Abraham had a school event that week. His wife had asked him to stay home more, to be present. But Enoch insisted. "This client specifically requested you," Enoch said. "This could open doors we have been trying to unlock for years. Trust me, brother. One trip, 3 days. Then you can take the whole next month off, spend time with your family." Samson believed him, because that is what trust does. It makes you vulnerable to the very people who should protect you. The accident happened on an isolated stretch of road between Port Harcourt and Aba. A truck lost control, crossed the median, collided head-on with Samson's vehicle. The driver of the truck disappeared. No witnesses came forward. The police report was filed and closed within a week. Mechanical failure, they said. Tragic accident. No one to blame. Samson Adebayo died on impact. He was 34 years old. He left behind a wife who was 6 months pregnant with their second child, a son who was 7 years old and still believed the world was fair, and a best friend who cried louder than anyone at the funeral. Enoch gave the eulogy. He stood before the congregation, tears streaming down his face, voice breaking with what everyone assumed was grief. He spoke of Samson's kindness, his brilliance, his unshakable integrity. He spoke of their brotherhood, their dreams, their promise to always protect each other's families. He looked directly at Samson's widow, at young Abraham sitting beside her with confusion in his eyes, and he made a vow. "I will take care of them," Enoch said. "I will honor Samson by ensuring his family never wants for anything. I will be the father Abraham needs, the brother Samson would want me to be. I promise you all, I will not let Samson's death be in vain." The congregation wept. They called Enoch loyal, noble, a true friend. They had no idea they were watching a performance. They had no idea the man crying at the pulpit was the same man who had paid for the truck, who had orchestrated the route, who had made sure there would be no witnesses. Within a month, the company underwent restructuring. Enoch, as surviving partner, assumed full control. Samson's shares, which should have transferred to his widow, were tied up in legal complexities that Enoch's lawyers insisted would take time to resolve. Months passed, then a year. The calls to Samson's widow became less frequent, then stopped altogether. The financial support Enoch had promised never materialized. When she reached out, his assistant said he was traveling in meetings, too busy to take her call. When she visited the office, security turned her away. The company that her husband had built, the legacy he had died believing would protect his family, closed its doors to her. She was left with a mortgage, 2 children, and the devastating realization that promises mean nothing when the person who made them has everything to gain from breaking them. If this betrayal already angers you, hit the like button, because justice is coming. And when it arrives, it will be wielded by the last person Enoch ever expected. Enoch's life exploded overnight. The investor's deal went through, then another, then 10 more. Money poured in faster than he could count it. He bought a mansion in Ikoyi with 12 bedrooms, a cinema, a pool that overlooked the lagoon. He bought cars that cost more than most houses. He joined exclusive clubs, attended state dinners, donated to charities with cameras present to capture his generosity. Politicians sought his counsel. Magazines featured him as a self-made success story, a visionary entrepreneur, a man who had overcome tragedy to build an empire. He married a woman 20 years younger, a former beauty queen who looked perfect on his arm at galas. He had children who attended international schools and spent summers in Europe. On paper, Enoch Okocha had won. He had everything a man could want. But paper burns easily. And beneath the success, beneath the applause, beneath the carefully constructed image of a man blessed by God and hard work, something was rotting. The nightmares started within the first year. Enoch would wake at 3 in the morning, drenched in sweat, convinced he had seen Samson standing at the foot of his bed. Not angry, not accusing, just staring, silent, watching. He tried medication, therapy, sleeping pills. Nothing worked, because you cannot medicate away guilt. You cannot pay a therapist to absolve you of murder. His wife noticed the distance, the way he flinched when anyone mentioned Samson's name, the way he refused to drive past their old office, the way he drank alone in his study until dawn, staring at nothing. His children grew up barely knowing him. He was always working, always traveling, always somewhere else. Even when he was physically present, he was absent, hollow. They learned early that their father's attention was a commodity they could not afford. Meanwhile, across the city, Samson's widow struggled. She sold her jewelry to pay for Abraham's school fees. She took on secretarial work. She moved to a smaller apartment, then a smaller one still. She watched her son grow up without his father, watched him ask questions she could not answer. Who killed Daddy? Why did Uncle Enoch stop helping us? Why does everyone forget us? Abraham was a quiet child, observant, serious, beyond his years. He watched his mother's hands shake when bills arrived. He watched her cry when she thought he was asleep. He watched the world move on from his father's death as if Samson Adebayo had never existed, as if his kindness and brilliance and love meant nothing compared to the convenience of forgetting. And in that watching, something hardened. A question formed, sharp and cold and patient. Who destroyed my father? Who stole our future? Who made my mother beg for work when she should have been a partner in a thriving company? Abraham did not know the answer yet, but he promised himself he would find it. He promised himself that whoever had taken everything from his family would pay. Not with apologies, not with explanations, with everything they had. The boy did not know it yet, but he was already preparing for war. And wars are won not by the strongest, but by those with nothing left to lose. The collapse started small. A deal fell through. A government contract was awarded to a competitor. Enoch shrugged it off. Business fluctuates. There would be other opportunities. But then another deal failed. A key investor pulled out without explanation. A lawsuit emerged from a former employee alleging financial impropriety. Then another lawsuit. Then an investigation. Enoch's lawyers assured him it was manageable. Disgruntled employees, competitors trying to sabotage his success. Nothing that money and influence could not handle. But the cracks kept spreading. Former allies stopped returning his calls. Invitations to exclusive events dried up. Banks that had once courted him began requesting audits, asking uncomfortable questions about certain transactions. His health deteriorated. Panic attacks that left him gasping for air in the middle of board meetings. Migraines that no medication could touch. His doctor suggested stress management. His therapist suggested confronting whatever he was running from. Enoch fired them both. He became paranoid, convinced his phones were tapped, convinced his employees were spying on him, convinced that everyone was conspiring against him. He was not entirely wrong. The universe has a way of turning your own weapons against you. The same corrupt networks Enoch had used to build his empire were now dismantling it, cutting ties before his fall dragged them down too. Across town, something else was happening. Abraham Adebayo was graduating top of his class from law school. Brilliant, focused, driven by a purpose his classmates could not understand. He specialized in corporate crime, financial fraud, the kind of cases that unraveled empires built on lies. He joined a prestigious firm, earned a reputation for being thorough, relentless, uncompromising. He took cases others avoided because they were too complex, too politically sensitive. He took them because complexity was where truth hid, and he was very good at finding it. One case landed on his desk, involving irregularities in government contracts awarded over the past decade. As he reviewed the files, a name kept appearing. Okocha Enterprises, Enoch Okocha. Abraham did not recognize the name at first. He had been 7 when his father died. His memories were fragments, his father's laugh, the way he smelled like cologne and coffee, the bedtime stories. His mother had stopped talking about the business, about Uncle Enoch, about everything related to that life. She had buried it to survive. But as Abraham investigated deeper, something tugged at him. A feeling, an instinct. He pulled his father's death certificate, checked the date against the timeline of Okocha Enterprises' expansion. The company had restructured 1 month after Samson Adebayo's death. Enoch Okocha had become sole owner. Samson's family had received nothing. Abraham sat in his office, the pieces assembling themselves in his mind with horrifying clarity. His father had not just died, he had been erased, and the man who had erased him had built a fortune on that grave. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The man who destroyed my family, who stole everything, who made my mother beg and scrape and suffer, is still out there, still rich, still powerful, still unpunished. Do not skip. The truth is closer than you think, and it is about to walk into a courtroom. Abraham worked like a man possessed. Every document, every contract, every suspicious transaction. He traced the money back through shell companies, offshore accounts, bribed officials. He found the truck driver who had fled the country after the accident, now living in Ghana, willing to talk for the right price and the promise of immunity. The driver described the man who had paid him, described the instructions, described the guilt that had eaten at him for years. Abraham recorded every word. He found the investor who had first proposed removing Samson. The man was old now, dying of cancer, suddenly interested in unburdening his conscience. He confirmed everything: the deal, the offer, Enoch's acceptance, the plan. Abraham built a case so airtight that no lawyer, no amount of money, no political connection could dismantle it. And then, in a twist that felt like the universe aligning, Abraham was assigned to prosecute the case. The senior partner called him into the office, handed him the file, said, "This is the biggest case of your career. Corporate fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion, conspiracy." The defendant, Enoch Okocha. Abraham held the file. His hands did not shake. He had been preparing for this moment his entire life without knowing it. Every late night studying while his mother worked 2 jobs. Every case he had won. Every skill he had sharpened. All of it had been leading here, to this file, to this name, to this moment of reckoning. He accepted the assignment, went home, sat across from his mother, told her what he had found. She wept, not from sadness, from relief, from the knowledge that her husband's death would finally mean something, that the truth would finally have a voice, that the man who had destroyed them would finally face what he had done. The trial was set. Media coverage was guaranteed. Enoch's lawyers were already preparing motions to dismiss, to delay, to obfuscate. They had no idea what was coming. They had no idea that the prosecutor was not just a lawyer. He was the son of the man their client had murdered. He was karma, wearing a suit and carrying evidence. And he was ready. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, spectators, former employees of Okocha Enterprises, hoping to witness the fall of the man who had used them and discarded them. Enoch entered in an expensive suit, flanked by 3 lawyers, projecting confidence he did not feel. He had lost weight. His face was drawn, eyes shadowed. But he smiled for the cameras, waved, played the role of the innocent man wrongly accused. He sat at the defense table, glanced around the room, and then he saw the prosecutor, a young man, mid-20s, approaching the table with files and a calm expression. Something about the face was familiar, the eyes, the shape of the jaw. Enoch frowned. Where had he seen this face before? The judge called the court to order. The prosecution began, and Abraham Adebayo spoke. His voice was steady, clear, carrying the weight of years of pain compressed into facts and evidence. He outlined the charges: corporate fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy to commit murder. The courtroom gasped. Murder? This was supposed to be a financial case. Abraham presented the evidence: the shell companies, the offshore accounts, the falsified records, the timeline of Samson Adebayo's death, and the immediate restructuring of the company. He called the truck driver to the stand. The man testified, voice shaking, about the payment, the instructions, the accident that was not an accident. Enoch's lawyers objected, called the testimony hearsay, unreliable, the desperate words of a man seeking immunity. Abraham called the investor to the stand. The old man, frail and clearly near death, described the deal, described Enoch's acceptance, described the plan to remove Samson. Objection after objection was overruled. The evidence was overwhelming. Witness after witness corroborated the same story. Enoch sat frozen, watching his life disassembled, piece by piece, in front of strangers. And then came the moment. Abraham approached the witness stand, where a financial expert had just finished testifying about how Enoch had systematically stolen Samson's share of the company. Abraham turned to the gallery, to the cameras, to the man sitting pale and sweating at the defense table. He spoke quietly, but every word carried. My name is Abraham Adebayo. 20 years ago, my father, Samson Adebayo, was murdered. He was a good man, a kind man, a man who built a business with his best friend, believing that loyalty meant something, believing that a handshake and a promise were sacred. After he died, his best friend promised to take care of our family, promised to honor his memory, promised to protect us. Abraham paused, looked directly at Enoch. The man on trial? The man sitting there in handcuffs? Is that friend? He is the man who murdered my father, who stole his legacy, who left my mother and me with nothing. And today, finally, he will answer for what he has done. The courtroom erupted. The judge called for order. Enoch's face had gone white. He stared at Abraham and the pieces fell into place. The eyes. Samson's eyes. The boy he had seen at the funeral. The child he had promised to protect and then abandoned. That child was now the man destroying him. The symmetry was almost beautiful, almost poetic. Enoch's lawyers scrambled for a recess. The judge denied it. The trial continued. More evidence, more testimony. The walls closed in, and Enoch sat there trapped, watching the son of the man he murdered dismantle everything he had built with the same precision and intelligence his father had once used to build it. If you believe karma never forgets an address, subscribe now, because this is not over. The verdict is coming, and it will leave nothing standing. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they returned, the forewoman stood and delivered the verdict with no hesitation. Guilty. Guilty on all counts. Corporate fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy to commit murder. The courtroom exploded with noise. Some cheered, some gasped. Journalists rushed out to file their stories. Enoch sat motionless, staring at nothing. The judge began sentencing. 25 years for the financial crimes. Life without parole for the conspiracy to commit murder. All assets seized. All accounts frozen. Everything Enoch had built, everything he had stolen, everything he had murdered for, was gone. Taken in the same courtroom where he had finally been forced to face what he had done. His wife had already filed for divorce. His children refused to see him. His so-called friends had vanished the moment the investigation began. He had nothing. No one. He was escorted out in handcuffs, cameras flashing, journalists shouting questions. He did not answer. What could he say? That it was not worth it? That he wished he could go back? That he would trade everything for one chance to undo that choice? None of it mattered now. In prison, Enoch Okocha became invisible. The thing he had feared most as a young man had finally happened. He was nothing. No one noticed him. No one cared. He had all the time in the world to think about Samson, to remember the man he had called brother, to replay every moment of their friendship and see it now through the lens of what he had destroyed. The nightmares continued. Samson standing silent, watching. But now Enoch understood. It was not haunting. It was witnessing. Samson was watching Enoch finally receive what he had always deserved. Accountability. Consequence. Justice. One night, alone in his cell, Enoch whispered to the darkness. It was not worth it. The money, the power, the success. None of it was worth losing you. None of it was worth becoming this. He waited for a response, for forgiveness, for anything. Nothing came. Because some debts cannot be paid with apologies. Some betrayals are too deep to heal, and some men die alone, not because they have no one, but because they destroyed everyone who ever loved them. Samson's widow received restitution. The seized assets were liquidated. She was awarded the share of the company that should have always been hers. She was awarded damages for the years of suffering, for the broken promises, for the life she had been forced to rebuild from nothing. She did not spend it on mansions or cars or revenge. She established a foundation in Samson's name, scholarships for children who had lost parents, legal aid for families fighting corporate injustice, support for widows left with nothing. She turned the stolen wealth into purpose, into legacy, into the kind of impact Samson would have wanted. Abraham continued his work as a prosecutor. He specialized in cases where the powerful had crushed the powerless, where money had bought silence, where justice had been delayed so long it seemed forgotten. He won more cases than he lost. He became known as the lawyer who never gave up, who believed that accountability was not optional, who understood that some fights are worth taking even when the odds seem impossible. Every victory was for his father. Every case was a continuation of the promise he had made as a child, watching his mother struggle. No one else should suffer what we suffered. No one else should watch evil prosper while goodness is buried and forgotten. Years passed. Enoch remained in prison. No early release, no parole. No redemption arc, where he found God or wrote a memoir, or became a cautionary tale that somehow rehabilitated his image. He simply existed. A footnote, a warning, a name that people eventually forgot. And perhaps that was the greatest punishment of all. To be erased the way he had tried to erase Samson. To be nothing in the end. Despite all the effort to be everything. The story spread. People told it in boardrooms and churches and family gatherings. A cautionary tale about loyalty and betrayal, about the long arc of justice, about how the choices we make in darkness eventually find light. Some heard it and changed course, canceled the unethical deal, honored the handshake, chose integrity over convenience. Others heard it and dismissed it as fiction, as coincidence, as something that could never happen to them. Those people are still out there, still making the same choice Enoch made, still believing they can outrun consequence, still convinced that success earned through betrayal is somehow still success. They are wrong. Karma does not forget. It simply waits. It waits for the right moment, the right person, the right alignment of choices and consequences. And when it arrives, it is absolute. Everything fell into place overnight for Enoch Okocha. The money, the power, the success, and everything collapsed just as quickly when the past refused to stay buried. Because the past never stays buried. It waits in the heart of a 7-year-old boy who grows into a man with evidence and purpose. It waits in the records that cannot be destroyed, the witnesses who eventually speak, the truth that eventually emerges no matter how deep you bury it. It waits because time is patient, and justice, real justice, is inevitable. So here's the question you need to answer. If you were Enoch, offered everything you ever wanted in exchange for betraying someone who trusted you, would you take it? Would you believe you could get away with it? Would you convince yourself that loyalty is optional when survival is at stake? And if you were Abraham, standing in that courtroom, holding the power to destroy the man who destroyed your family, would you feel satisfaction? Would you feel empty? Would you forgive? Comment your answer below. And subscribe for more stories where karma always collects. Because these stories are not just entertainment. They are reminders that the choices you make in secret will eventually be judged in public. That the people you betray will not stay powerless forever. That the universe keeps perfect records. And that some debts, no matter how long they take to collect, will always come due. Always.